Alex, welcome back to We Love Ugly Data, the Deep Analysis podcast. It's episode 39. Don't question the number. We're not doing that again. We talked about that last episode, or series 5, episode 5, which is definitely right. I'm here, which is good because all my stuff is here. Alan's here. I'm back from his travels. Hi, Alan.
Hello.
Just a warning ahead of time. Might be slightly lower energy than normal. Alan's got some lurgy from traveling because that's what happens when you travel. In the UK, we're recording this on the 27th of May, so just before the end of the month. It's been incredibly hot the last few days. And if you don't know me, here's an interesting fact to me. Well, interesting, it's a fact. Above 21 degrees Celsius, for each additional degree above that, I lose 10% of brain function. Yesterday was in the 30s, so basically I had no brain function. I'm recovering a little bit, so I'm just a little bit overheated, more than normal, I guess. So if I'm a little bit lower energy, it's that. It's not because anything in this is anything less than thrilling. And talking about thrilling, let's get into the format because we all love the format. The format, or part of the format, is telling you the format. And here's the format. Format's 3 topics, 30 minutes. Maybe if it's a low energy episode, we'll keep to 30 minutes today. We won't keep to 30 minutes today. We never keep to 30 minutes. But the stopwatch running. I'll keep an eye on it. Maybe we will this time. Topic 1. New vendor profiles. Alan, we published a bunch of vendor profiles at the beginning of May. We're not going to talk about them all today. We published 6. Dan is on next month for another IDP, very news-focused IDP one. So some of them are holding back to talk to Dan about because Dan's the man on the spot, if you like, for them. So we're going to talk about 3 of them today, which is half of 6. See, some of them my brain is still working. Just so if you're a subscriber and you're like, hang on a second, I didn't know we had 6 more. There are new ones on Box, on Papyrus, on Indico, on Retoris, on Highland, and on Duvo, the new one. So those are the 6 that we've published. But we're going to focus on 3 of those today, just to give you a little bit of insight into those. So a company of which you are probably the leading expert on, Alan, Highland. Well, you probably are. If we were going to invite anybody on to talk about Highland who's not from Highland, we'd struggle to find somebody who knew more about Highland than you did. I mean, that's probably fair.
Oh, no. Yeah, well, I've been covering them a very, very long time. Highland and OpenText. I believe, I don't know if this is true, but I believe it. I think I was the first analyst to ever write about either of them, or certainly write reports about either of them.
So it's your fault.
It is. Their success is my fault. And they are both very successful in their own way. Highland. So we cover Highland a lot. Why wouldn't we? They're one of the key players in this market. So, and they've gone through enormous change over the last couple of years.
Yep.
New CEO, new direction, and that's what this report picks up on, really. Their sort of move, along with everybody else's move, obviously. This whole agentic document processing, and it's not really. I mean, you can read the report obviously and get the details here, but it's another of these vendors who are jumping on the agentic bandwagon, and why not? Nothing wrong with that. I would say though that here's the thing with the whole agentic processing in Highland specifically. Highland's probably got it about right. They've got to move forward, and they've got to deliver on all the promises, just like any vendor. No different with Highland, but I think their logic is pretty good. I mean, it's basic stuff, but one of the first things they did under the new leadership was to recognize that not everything's going to live in a Highland repository.
Right.
And not everything is going to move to the cloud. And well done for them, because that sounds basic and obvious, but actually that's not the strategy of a lot of people, right?
And most customers have some form of heterogeneous IT environment in which they operate, right?
They just do. And so they recognize that very early on and sort of put that central to their strategy. So moving forward, they've sort of built, and again, maybe Dan can talk about this more in a separate podcast, but they've built out their IDP stuff. And so the basic, well, as if you can see the slide, if you're watching this on YouTube, they've embedded agentic automation into what they call their content innovation cloud, which is their big go-to-market packaging, basically.
So is this directed, so just taking this slightly, obviously, those are people who know Highland know that Highland consists of a number of acquired repositories and acquired runtimes and code bases. And if you didn't, you now know that.
Yeah.
Is this directed at trying to make an attempt to kind of unify these and get these people onto the same kind of way of working, or is it more to attract net new customers into Highland?
Oh, well, I mean, obviously it's both, because they want to grow, and you grow through bringing in new customers. But here's the twist with a Highland or an open text, who are, obviously a key rival. They have huge customer bases already.
Yeah.
And so, if you think about the sort of the stratospheric end of the market, and you take somebody like an Oracle doesn't need any new customers, right? They just need to keep the ones they've got happy and continue selling, upselling, cross-selling to them.
Well, Oracle increasingly needs the people it's contracted to actually pay their bills, but that's a whole other story.
That's a whole other story. But so Highland's in that sort of position. They have a huge customer base. Would they like to attract new customers? Of course they would.
Well, of course, yes.
But I would say primarily this is about leveraging what you might say on two elements to it. One, the huge customer base, which is the obvious bit. But B, the fact that their customers, the crown jewels, the information assets, are living in Highland repositories, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's why we're quite positive about this, because so many of these other agentic dreams just seem to believe that, oh, it's just data, I can grab hold of it. Yeah, no, you can't. It's locked down for a good reason, right? So when Highland comes along and says, yes, it's locked down for a good reason, and we're going to make sure it's locked down, and we're going to make sure it's secure, and we're going to make sure it's maintained and governed. But that doesn't mean you can't do agentic processing, right? You'll do your agentic processing and whatever your ambitions are with agents in a truly governed and secure way. And that's refreshing.
So that's Highland agentic document processing. And onto Papyrus, another long-standing vendor in this space, of which you are, I'm not saying the only expert, but a leading expert or long-standing advocate of. And now this is particularly around the Alfie AI stuff that they've been, a different use of AI for a different kind of purpose within their platform. What can you tell us a little bit about Alfie and about what Papyrus are up to?
Yeah, so Papyrus is another very interesting vendor, I think, and the one that goes under the radar most of the time. And by the way, deep analysis, that's something we do try and surface. I can't help myself. I was going to say I'm not going to have a dig at Gartner, but I am.
Oh, go on. Why not?
Why not? No, but when you see a magic quadrant, there's not that this is intentional from Gartner, it's not. But when you see a magic quadrant, you think, oh, that's the market. That's not. There's hundreds of other vendors who aren't on it.
Yes.
And they're not on it for various reasons. So whether Papyrus appears on a magic quadrant or not, they're a key player, and they've been around a long time. They're based in Austria. They're privately funded, privately owned, and they have a really, really good reputation.
And particularly in sort of Central European financial services, they're very
financial services, mortgage processing, things like that. Yeah. And again, I mean, they're a very, highly respected company. They really are. And so they've been around a long time. But what they've done, again, guess what, agents? They've released this thing called Alfie, as in the owl. And what is it? Well, it's sort of a coming together of low code, which have been, by the way, they were, I wouldn't say they were pioneers in the entire industry, but they were early in recognizing that, okay, everything doesn't need to go to IT and use a lot of code. As business users need to fiddle around with things in real time. So low code, business user friendly design, I think we've said here, and then bringing in this agentic layer. Of the ones we've looked at, and you looked at this one with me,
yes,
it actually seemed like a bit like Highland again, all within a compliant, governed situation, right? This is not, again, ripping data out and doing wonderful things with it. It's recognizing that first and foremost, their customers are highly regulated and highly risk averse.
Yep.
So Alfie basically gives them an environment where they can start playing around with agents and automation without getting themselves into a lot of trouble.
Yep, and you know, you look at the sort of the demos that we looked at, an awful lot of that was form building, form handling, that kind of stuff, and that's the reality of lots of these processes in lots of organizations in lots of industries. Is maybe that's not what you're going to see a demo at a flashy conference, because it isn't very exciting, but this is the bread and butter of process management.
Yeah, and that's what we are looking for. Basically, I mean, we had a briefing yesterday without going too far off. Two. Both of them actually, you know, guess what? Hitting on real world dull problems that people need fixing. We love that.
Well, absolutely, we do, and we'll come on to that maybe in the section 2, where we can talk a little bit more about how we're becoming more specific on that. Last one for this roundup is Duvo. Duvo is a new one to us. First time that we've written about them. Specialist in retail. In fact, they really are a spin-off from a grocery retail startup in Czechia, so the former Czech Republic. In fact, they share the CEO with an online grocery retailer. The reason why this attracted us in the first place is they are looking in the first place at a type of process analysis that we haven't seen anybody really do before, which is, if you remember, traditional process analysis involves interviews. It involves asking people how processes work and write them on a whiteboard. One of the things that Duvo have gone, well, actually, that isn't a bad idea to retain that, but what if we record that in video and audio form, and then let AI try to deduce the process in a low-code format from what someone's describing. So it's kind of jumping the whiteboard parts, if you like, and turning it straight into an adjustable low-code process. So it's a way of really doing an ingestion, but rather than ingesting an SOP, which they can also do, or ingesting a bunch of other documents, they're ingesting audio and video and turning in that way. Now, that's an interesting approach to it. They believe that it significantly reduces the time from the description. So my brain's catching up, it's spooling still. It reduces the time from someone sitting down saying, hey, I'll tell you about my process, and you having a usable process map or a usable low-code interpretation of that. And we had to kind of a little bit take their word for it, because there is a whole runtime underneath there as well for running that process, which is the other part of the process. Interesting part of the other part of that process that actually runs the process is that they've got kind of voice agents, and which voice agents in these retail processes can also be instructed to, make phone calls out to suppliers to query deliveries and that kind of thing, which is an interesting additional thing. Obviously, they focus specifically on retail and distribution use cases, and their background as a online grocery retailer is helpful there. So they know how many of those processes typically involve having to make a manual chase on the phone or having to write an email and wait for something to come back, because that's how they deal with their various number of suppliers. So I think it's kind of an interesting approach. You sat in on the briefing with that, Alan. Anything else you'd like to add?
Well, only that I think it's just interesting this year when we're looking at what we're looking at. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. When we're taking a step back and considering all the briefings we're having, there's an interesting trend, isn't there, of practicality?
Yes, definitely.
And whereas a few years ago it was like, whoa, never thought of that, never thought.
Well, and we spent all of last year telling people be specific, and now they're turning up being specific.
Who knows? Yeah, never know. And this was another one that you just thought when we went through the whole thing with them, you just thought, well, that makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Very practical.
Yeah.
Could use that. And the truth is, a few years ago, there was all really cool stuff, but you really struggled to wonder how somebody went up using it or taking it to market. Clever stuff. Mm-hmm. That's what it was. It was clever stuff. Whereas now, like Druvo, and we mentioned just there, Highland and Papyrus, and there's more in the works coming. Yep. Almost every one, you sit there and you think, that makes sense.
Well, if you want to know a bit more about it, and it's up on screen for people who are watching, but if you're not, I will tell you about it, is that Duvo have made this vendor profile available via their website. I haven't mentioned show notes yet. I normally mention show notes by now. All the links for this will be in the show notes. So amongst the links in the show notes will be a link to this vendor profile, which is available for free from Duvo's website. So if you're not a subscriber and you're like, well, I'd love to see these profiles, but I'm not a subscriber, here's a chance to see one for free, courtesy of Duvo. And you can read the whole thing in great detail at your leisure. So there's a gift from Duvo to you. Obviously, I think it's preferably towards people who might buy the software, but still, I think, if you're interested, one, in Duvo, because I think you're an interesting company, and two, if you've not read one of the vendor profiles before and you'd like to have an idea about what they're like, maybe you want to approach us to do a briefing and you want to know what the output looks like. Here's a perfect example to get your feet a little bit wet on that.
Just one quick thing. If you do brief us, it doesn't mean we're going to write it up.
Oh God, no. No. We take
a lot more how it works.
Anyway, next time.
Yeah, at the moment we seem to be writing up quite a few of them. That's the truth of it. But that goes back to what I was saying. There's some really good ones coming through. A lot of the time, it's not that they're not good. It's just there's nothing much to write about.
Well, they're not ready yet. They're not ready. Sometimes they're not ready yet. And we're like, we'll come back in 3 months and we'll have another conversation. And that's telling me the time to write something. So anyway, next month, we will cover the other half of this release of 6. In the meantime, if you want to look at the summaries of them, the link will be in the show notes. If you want to get ahead of yourself, if you're a subscriber, you probably already read these, printed them out, had them tattooed, discussed them with your friends and neighbors, which is great. And of course, if you want to be a subscriber, just get in touch and we can make that happen for you. Next topic, I should have given this a better title than AEC Report, because actually it's a more exciting thing that it looks at first value, not just AEC, but actually what we're doing with it. I don't know how much we're going to talk about the everything that we're doing behind this. Maybe we'll do as part of a slow reveal. But let's just get to the kind of newsy points. New blog post, Alan, new research. Why most AEC automation fails and where AI actually helps. I think maybe it'd be useful for those people who don't know what AEC is. Do you want to just define it quickly?
Yeah,
and then we can take it from there.
So AEC is architecture, engineering, construction, basically. So, but more specifically, certainly from our perspective, is big projects, right? So whether you're building the next Channel Tunnel, God help us, or whether you're building a hotel complex or whatever.
Yeah,
right?
Big housing development or
big housing development. So basically that's AEC. And as you know, over the last year, actually it's maybe even a little bit more than that in the back of my head at least, but certainly over the last year, we've been looking at this in more detail, partly through client engagements. People who've asked us to look at the construction industry, oil and gas, for example. But the truth is, it's one of those which is a real head scratcher in the sense that, our world is unstructured data, or as we used to call it, documents. And you can't really get a more document and drawing heavy industry than AEC. You just can't. I mean, it's just absolutely, this is the lifeblood of it. And yet it's almost all manual. Now, some people who hear me say that will push back and say, oh, there's been big advances with AutoCAD and that's an old term actually, but BIM, business information management. Yeah, there's lots of things been happening, but the truth of the matter is that most of it is still manual, whether that's a PDF or an actual paper drawing, it's manual. And so we've been scratching our heads and saying, well, why? And this is the first report we've come out, which sort of does explain why. That's the whole purpose of the report. And we won't go into it in too much detail here, but there are good reasons why. It's not as straightforward as it first looks. There's real complexities here that most generic software tools can't deal with. So there are real reasons. It's not because they're Luddites. It's not because they don't want to automate. It's not because they don't want to do these things. It's because the market hasn't caught up with them. But there's the twist. It is starting to. We're talking now to vendors who can do some of this. We're talking to other vendors who I won't name names here, but have been surprised themselves when they've sold into a few AEC companies, how suddenly they sell into 20 more. There's an appetite here, there's a market here. And so we're doing basically a lot on this. We have a market forecast coming up, but there's a lot more to it. This is going to be a significant part, I think, of what
So this is a significant technology market. I think that's something that we know, having spent a few months building a market sizing and vendor listings and vendor profiles within that market. It's a big technology market. It's underserved in lots of ways. It's underserved by us as analysts. We don't talk about it a lot. We talk about a lot about financial services, a lot about pharmaceutical, a lot about high technology, and very little, if at all, about AEC and its component parts. The technology market is interesting because it covers everybody from individual contractors, because of course within each individual project, even massive, often there are an awful lot of sole traders in there. Everything up to enormous concerns. As the thing on screen for people who are watching can see, but if you're not listening, if you're listening rather than viewing, you can see this, or you can't see the text. I'll read it out. This week we released the first in a series of reports. So as Alan said, this is the first of a series of things we're doing that includes stuff that we all done before. So vendor profiles, we've got vendor profiles coming out for specific vendors in this space. There's market sizing, but there's also some other things that are coming in the actually short to medium term, which actually are a new way of approaching the way in which we're doing analysis that we can talk about in future in future podcasts. But onto the report itself. The report is available now for subscribers. It's not something we're giving away for free.
Yeah, actually, I've changed my mind on that. It was available only to subscribers.
Okay.
But there's been so many queries about it. I'm going to break the rules. I'm actually going to ask our webman to move this so that it's freely downloadable.
Well, there you go. I was about to go. Well, you can't see it because it's behind the paywall for subscribers only, which it is at the time of recording this. But by the time of listening to it, you should be able to download it for free via the form. So if you downloaded the free reports, we know we like to get some details just in return for the free report. So there'll be links in the show notes to that by the time the show notes come out for you. But talk about the report. The report's called AEC documentation, so it's specific. Why general automation fails, where huge AI opportunities lie, and how to leverage them. So it's offering a lot in that title. We're promising a lot. Can you give us a little summary to encourage people to download it? Now I learn they're going to be able to download it for free.
Yeah. So this, as I say, it's a sort of a 101, as we say in America, right? It's a basic intro document. That's what it's about, right? It's to explain why, is there a market? Yes, there is. Obviously, we wouldn't be writing it. But really, it's exploring why the heck is it so underserved, right? You've touched on some of the points, but to touch on another one. But again, please download the report and read it for yourself. But the fact is that if we think about AEC, what's the first thing that comes to head? Well, drawings, right? Yeah, that's the lifeblood. Yes, there's lots of documents as well. There's lots of drawings. Drawings are really tricky things. And do we have IDP tools that can read drawing? Yes, we do. Up to a point. This is where it gets really tricky, right? And so in the report, we talk about things like FREX, XREFs, and various layers, and and symbols, etc., etc. So I think we've done a pretty good job of simplifying and laying that out where the challenges are, but equally where the opportunities are. But moving forward, the long story short here, the technology does actually exist to really help the AEC sector. Has anybody really gone and sold it to them yet? No. Has anybody got an end-to-end solution? No. But all of the piece parts do exist. Yeah. There's always going to be limitations. There's always going to be humans in the loop. We're not talking about AI coming in here and automating the jobs of document controllers, for example. Not happening. in fact, the exact opposite. And I think this is one of the positive stories for me, at least, having personally had a background in document control in AEC. This really elevates the role of document control, right? So historically, all document, I say all they've done, they do a lot, but what AEC document controllers do is basically make sure you have the right revision, right? And you know, and make sure things are numbered properly. This really helps them enormously, the new technologies coming. So I'm rattling on here. There is a report. It is free.
Let's just give a couple of examples. A couple of examples just to whet people's appetite, because we talk about AI, and I think that people might be thinking, well, I don't necessarily. Give us some examples about quick examples about how AI is useful. Just to give a couple of ones, and I think just think about things we talked about the last week, and think about AI takeoffs and AI for permitting, right? So takeoffs is to take about drawings. If you're looking, and this is a particular use case, I've been sent a drawings and asked to do an estimate on a piece of work as a contractor to work on that. We're talking about pieces of software that recognize on the plans what are the parts of, you know, the individual parts of the plans, the elements of the construction, produce outputs of the dimensions, potentially materials, all the other things that are actually contained within the plans, and surface that so I can put a price to it. So rather than having to do, you know, detailed analysis of that before I can even do an estimate, this can take care of that. We were talking to somebody on permitting this week, where AI enables them to be able to meet compliance on permitting for things like egress times. So you had to be able to get from a habitable room to a fire escape in a certain number of steps or a certain time, or it'll be rejected under planning rules, depending where you are in the world. And of course, they're all different. This way, able to recognize the rooms, egress, doorways, you know, stairwells, corridors, and helps provide that compliance up front without anybody having to draw recognized polygons on the map and actually step it out. Just a couple of the quick examples.
No, that's good, and that's actually a much better way than I was putting it. It was basically, I was saying that the role of document controllers today is making sure they're numbered properly, that everybody's got the right revision, and that the procedures are followed. That's all still important.
Yep.
But to your point, there's a ton of information in these drawings and documents, and they're interrelated, and there's context. And now we've got the technology to really start doing something with that. And we're very bullish about the AEC sector, and so are some of the people we're talking to. But a lot of the others, to rewind, why did I even have to say what AEC is?
Yes.
A lot of the other vendors have not scratched the surface or even looked at this.
No. And the good thing is that you say it's a big technology market. There's a whole raft of really interesting startups that we're already talking to, and already got stuff in train to add those for future vendor profiles. And of course, there is a big M&A market, which is something else we will be talking about in time. There are some large, highly acquisitive, big suite vendors in there. So all the elements you'd find within the normal technology market are in there. And the interesting thing, if you're not familiar with it, it will all be new to you. And there's a whole other area to explore. A lot more to come on this over the next few months. And with luck, this will not be the last interesting vertical sector that we approach in this way. This is just with luck and all things going well, this will be the first of a few of a small number, but a few that we'll be approaching to add additional value.
Yeah, and the other most obvious one, anybody who follows deep analysis will already have guessed this, is supply chain. And we are doing a lot of work in supply chain, but these initial reports are all about AEC, and that will be a focus. But if you want to know about AEC or supply chain, deep analysis is the analyst firm to come to.
Oh, great little mini advert. Last topic. Well, the whole thing's a big advert. What am I talking about? Advert within an advert. A little bit of meta. Last topic: runtimes and processes. We talked last month about work intelligence, which is kind of a collection of all sorts of enterprise automation runtimes. Really, if you dig into it, we're not going to retread that. If you want to learn about that, go back to last month, which, if you're watching on YouTube, will be on the right-hand side probably but it's there, and with all the links for about it. I've written a couple of posts this month, which are kind of related about it. One, they're up on screen. One's called "What if AI gets stuck at the task and never reaches the process?" And the other is "Enterprises don't need another automation runtime unless you give them an excellent reason." The first of those is lots of stuff around agents is very much task-based, and listening to organizations who start to do implementation, they're struggling to find a way of moving it from individual piece part tasks, particularly desktop stuff, and actually moving it into somewhere where it has a strategic impact. Now, of course, that's important because the higher the strategic impact, it's higher value. We start to get into bigger contracts. And everybody might start making some money on this. So that's an interesting one. The one I want to focus on in the remaining few minutes I've got left we've got in this podcast is the second one, which is the one that enterprises don't need another automation runtime. And thinking about that, particularly in the light of work intelligence, I came up with kind of 4 areas where I think that if you're pitching specifically an agentic runtime, an agentic automation, an agentic workflow, what have you got to do to be able to exceed what you can already do really well with lots of different existing workflows, right? RPAs, BPMs, all that kind of stuff that already exists, and is continuing to innovate and continuing to add AI as well. I mean, thinking back to what we were talking about earlier on about ISIS and about Highland, these things aren't standing still. So what have you got to do? What 4 things could you think about as a new agentic enterprise to what you can do that's different? I came up with four ideas. The first of which primarily is problem solving. One of the things that's been sold a lot around agentic is the ability to think around problems, to be able to solve problems. But why is that important? Well, the biggest issue with all automations is exceptions. Every time a human has to intervene to solve something which is out of scope or out of scale for the way the workflow was designed, costs time, costs money, means the duration time for an individual instance of a workflow task takes longer, right? So the primary selling point of agentic is the ability to do problem solving. So that's kind of like the first big thing you need to be able to do. Secondarily, it needs to have additional flexibility. If you talk to organizations about managing automations, one of the biggest pains for them is every time something needs to be changed, it's a whole big change control thing, right? It's a big overhauling process because these are oil tanker size operations sometimes to move around. If agentic has a greater flexibility to be able to adjust automations, not necessarily on the fly, that would be nice, be able to change the way in which automations work without it becoming a whole code level rewrite or even a no code level rewrite. That flexibility built into it provides some additional value. Third thing is inheritance. You've got to take on legacy. You can't ignore that processes already exist and automations already exist. So the ability to better inherit stuff that's already in place as part of your approach, you have to be able to do that. That's to use a horrible North American gambling term, it's table stakes, really, I think, for anybody coming into an organization. And lastly, fraternity, right? You've got to be able to operate with the humans in a fraternal way to make sure that these processes come on. The idea is not necessarily that arriving and saying we're automating people away, because no serious organization really believes that's possible. You've got to be able to operate with all the humans in train, from those developer IT people through the operators, the people who deal with the exceptions, and all the end using points, whether they're internal or external, and manage all those relationships in a fraternal way. So those are my four points for making agentic potentially valuable. Alan, anything you'd like to add to that, or just nod and say they're all very good, Matt?
Well, they are all very good, but I think the big thing here is why are we talking about things like this? Is because if you believe the hype, every organization is now, 3/4 of the way down the road to being agentic. It's just not the case. It's just not the case. This is proving to be a very hard sell. Idea's great. Actually putting it into practice, remarkably difficult. So yeah, I mean, excuse my language. Just ignored a call from somebody there, but yeah, no, I mean, the point is with agentic stuff, you know, when you get away from the hype, it's not nonsense. It's not nonsense at all. There's some really good technology here. There's some good ideas, but deploying it in the real world is proving to be remarkably difficult.
Yep. No, it is. In fact, I've got some stuff on my whiteboard for a blog post to write tomorrow, which if I finished it and published it in time, I'll put it into the show notes today, which is really about spanning. If you imagine there's a box on one side that says the stuff you know you can do right now, a box over here that says stuff you could imagine it might be possible to do. There's a space in the middle called like the plausibility gap, and how big that space is depends on kind of where you are. For some people, those things are very close. We're inches away from being able to do science fiction. For a lot of organizations, it's a huge way apart, and it's that space, that plausibility space at the moment, which is the one which is filled with all sorts of hot air and ideas, and probably some small nuggets of truth. I will be hopefully writing about that tomorrow, and I'll put links in for it as we go, as well as links to those two aforementioned blog posts. And that's it. That's it for the month. We've overrun. Of course, we've overrun. Even with a low energy group, we still overrun. Alan, thanks as ever. You get a break next month because Dan's on, so you can chill and enjoy me and him making fools of ourselves here. So next time there'll be 3 more topics, kind of IDP ones, I'd imagine. So 3 more topics, IDP focused, 30 minutes to discuss them in. Thanks as ever for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Thanks very much. Bye.